Let's go to New South Wales now, because after months of freedom for the fully vaxxed, this coming Wednesday is D-Day for the unvaccinated.
Yes, those who have not received the jab able to rejoin the rest of society with a suite of rules, also easing as the state moves closer to normality.
For more on this, we're joined by the CEO of the Australian Retailers Association, Paul Zara, and infectious diseases expert, Professor Sanjaya Senanayake. Thank you for both of you for joining us this morning. We'll start with you, Paul. Look, it hasn't been easy the past few months for retail staff. They've had to be checking the vaccination status of all the customers. What has it been like for them all?
Well, it's certainly been challenging, but of course retailers were just pleased to be open, of course. So it's taken a little time to socialise customers. But in saying that, we've seen, very few instances in New South Wales specifically. So we're pleased when the vaccination certificates checks are lifted, because it's one less thing for shop staff to do.
What's the feeling in the industry allowing the unvaccinated into New South Wales businesses from Wednesday, with masks also now not required? And have any of these concerns been raised?
No, look, it's been generally seen as a celebration of us hitting certain milestones. So getting them to the 95% vaccination rate. And, obviously we've followed public health orders right through the pandemic. So, and we've trusted the public health officials. So it is really a celebration. So we're all looking forward to the checks stopping. And of course, the mask wearing going was a great thing as well, because we know we're past those points of concern.
We know that density limits, that's the 1 person per 2 square metre rule, is also being scrapped for places like hairdressers, beauty salons, nail salons. A lot of those businesses have been really hampered by that rule, so they must be pretty excited.
Well, absolutely, because one thing about the retail industry, we make up, for the discretionary retailers, up to 2/3 of their profits are made up during this particular quarter, trading through Christmas. So having those density limits reduced, or removed rather, has allowed restaurants to trade at their full potential, and also hairdressers to trade at their full potential. So obviously the industry is very, very pleased and excited to hear that.
Let's bring in the Professor now. The news this morning, Professor, that the wait time for the booster shots cut from 6 months down to 5. Is it the right call?
Look, I think it's a reasonable thing to do, because there isn't much data about giving it less than 20 weeks after the second dose. And we've got the concerns about Omicron and laboratory emerging data suggesting that a booster will make a difference, whereas 2 doses might not be as effective. So I think that's a reasonable compromise to make. And of course, now we've got Moderna as well as a potential booster.
Yeah, that's right. So Pfizer and Moderna now available as booster shots. People in New South Wales have been feeling a little concerned. They're used to seeing the case numbers in the 200s. They've jumped to about 560 yesterday. Do you expect that to go even higher on Wednesday, when unvaccinated people are allowed in and people don't have to wear masks anymore?
Look, I think that potentially could happen. So if you look at that R0, or that effective reproduction number, which tells us how quickly an outbreak is growing, in New South Wales it has gone up a little bit. It was about 1.6 yesterday, so it has gone up, and that makes sense with the increased activity and the parties and gatherings that we're seeing. So it is quite possible and quite likely that we will see a further increase with the unvaccinated being able to mix in those venues. However, New South Wales is very well vaccinated, so hopefully we should be able to contain those increasing cases.
So you're not too concerned about the unvaxxed and the vaxxed mingling in these environments, Professor?
Look, not too much, but not even as an infectious diseases doctor, but just as a consumer. It never bothered me to just go into a venue and wear a mask if I couldn't physically distance safely, and use a QR code, which makes the life of public health officials much easier. And be curious to know if Paul thinks that impacts on the running of a venue, but as a consumer, it never bothered me.
Yeah. Look, in speaking of the vaccination rates, initially, people were expecting New South Wales to be at 95% by Wednesday, when all of these changes come into force. We're not going to quite get there. Does that matter, do you think?
No, look, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. And if you look at it from a global point of view, we're around that top 30 mark in terms of countries and their vaccine rollout. So we're doing pretty well. So we'll just have to see what happens. And of course, there's the uncertain factor of Omicron.
The border barricades coming down, Professor, in the early hours of tomorrow morning for Queensland. The Queenslanders have now been warned to expect a case influx. How long do you think that will take, if it's going to happen, to become a reality?
I would have thought within a week, given the incubation period of Delta's about 3 or 4 days, we'd start to see some cases. But they're pretty well vaccinated. They've had about 88% of first vaccinations. Be nice for that to be over 90%, but they've done very well in the last few weeks.